My name is Emily Carter, and the day my own brother laughed while I was being erased from our family nearly broke me. Until months later, when I walked into his company's boardroom, placed my briefcase on the table, and said, "Meet your new boss," as security waited behind him. Before I tell you how I got there, tell me where you're watching from and write it in the comments. Because this story starts in a place so small and cruel it still tightens my chest to remember. It was a rainy Tuesday evening in my little North Carolina house, the kind where the sky presses down like it's listening, when I stood in my kitchen gripping my phone with both hands, already knowing how the call would end. I dialed my brother anyway. "Aaron," I said the moment he picked up, my voice thin, "Dad doesn't have much time left. He keeps asking for you, he wants to see you." There was a pause, then a sharp laugh on the other end. "You're kidding me, right?" "I'm not," I said. "He's in hospice. It's bad." "Emily," Aaron sighed, bored like I'd interrupted a meeting. "I'm not flying back for some melodrama. You always make things sound worse than they are." "This isn't about me," I snapped. "This is about our father." "And I've got a company to run," he replied coldly. "Handle it like you always do." The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long second, then lowered it slowly, my hand shaking as anger burned behind my eyes. "Unbelievable," I whispered to the empty kitchen. An hour later, I was sitting beside my father's bed in the hospice room, the lights dim, machines humming softly like they were afraid to disturb him. His skin looked thinner, almost translucent, and when he turned his head toward me, he smiled like he'd been waiting all day. "Did you talk to your brother?" he asked, his voice rough but gentle. I swallowed. "I did." He searched my face. "He's busy, isn't he?" "Yes," I said quietly, taking his hand. "Very busy." He squeezed my fingers with what little strength he had left. "You always tell the truth without hurting people," he murmured. "That's rare." I leaned closer. "Dad, is there anything you want me to tell him?" He smiled, a tired, knowing smile. "No, he wouldn't hear it." Then his eyes softened as he looked at me. "Emily, you've always been the one I'm proud of." My breath caught. "Dad, not because you stayed," he added, his voice barely above a whisper, "but because you cared." The door creaked open slightly as a nurse checked in, then closed again, leaving us in the quiet. I brushed my thumb over his hand, fighting tears. Outside in the hallway, my phone buzzed. A text from Aaron. "Don't drag me into this again." I closed my eyes, my jaw tightening as I slid the phone into my pocket and went back into the room, choosing silence over screaming, not knowing yet how expensive that silence would become. A week later, I was sitting in the same hospice room, in the same stiff chair pulled too close to my father's bed, watching his chest rise and fall as he slept, shallow but steady. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the window streaked in gray, and the room smelled like antiseptic, warm blankets and something final I didn't have a name for yet. I leaned forward and brushed my fingers through his thinning hair. "You used to hate when I did this," I whispered with a sad smile. "You said it messed it up." He didn't stir. The silence gave my thoughts permission to wander, and they went straight where I'd been trying not to let them. "Aaron, always Aaron." I pulled my phone from my bag and scrolled without thinking. Missed calls from him over the years stared back like a quiet accusation, or maybe not missed, ignored. Birthdays I'd reminded him about. Holidays I'd begged him to show up for. The voicemail from 2 years ago, the one I'd saved by mistake. "Hey Em, can't make it this year. Things are crazy." "You understand, I'd always understood, too much." "He hasn't been here in 2 years," I said aloud, my voice barely more than breath. "Not once." My father shifted slightly, a soft sound escaping him, and I froze, waiting to see if he'd wake. When he didn't, I continued, quieter. "Not when you collapsed, not when they moved you here, not even to pretend." I remembered the first night he'd been hospitalized. I'd called Aaron over and over, pacing the ER hallway, the smell of coffee and disinfectant thick in the air. "Aaron," I'd said when he finally answered, relief flooding me. "Dad's in the hospital, they think it's serious." "And," he'd replied flatly. "And they don't know yet," I'd snapped. "I'm scared." There had been a pause, then a sigh. "Emily, I can't drop everything every time there's a scare. Call me when you actually know something." I'd hung up shaking, telling myself he was just stressed. He always had an excuse. "He's always been selfish," I murmured now, smoothing my father's hair again. "I just didn't want to see it." The machine beside the bed beeped steadily, indifferent to my bitterness. I rested my forehead against the mattress and let memories come whether I invited them or not. Aaron leaving for college and never really coming back. Aaron missing Thanksgiving because of important meetings. Aaron skipping Dad's last birthday with a quick text and a bottle of wine delivered by courier. Meanwhile, I'd been here, every doctor's appointment, every late-night call, every quiet moment like this one where love felt heavy instead of warm. The door creaked open and a nurse peeked in. "He's been resting well today," she said softly. "Thank you," I replied, standing to stretch my stiff legs. She smiled kindly. "You've barely left his side." I nodded, not trusting myself to explain why. After she left, I sat back down and took my father's hand again. His skin felt cool, fragile. "I don't know how you made peace with him," I whispered. "I don't know if I can." His fingers twitched barely, but it felt like an answer anyway. I straightened, a slow resolve settling in my chest, not loud, not angry, just solid. I had spent years absorbing Aaron's absence, his cruelty disguised as ambition. I had let it slide because it was easier than confronting it. "That ends here," I thought, my grip tightening slightly around my father's hand. "I won't let him walk away from this," I said softly, more to myself than to anyone else. "Not anymore." The room stayed quiet, heavy with memory and unspoken promises, as my father slept on and I sat there, finally understanding that love didn't mean silence, and that some debts don't disappear just because you pretend they don't exist. The funeral took place 3 days later, on a cold morning when the sky hung low and gray over the cemetery, as if it couldn't decide whether to rain or just watch. I stood at the edge of the grave in a black coat that felt too thin for the wind, my hands clasped so tightly in front of me my fingers ached. The minister was speaking, but his words blurred together, fading behind the sound of dirt and distant traffic. All I could think was that my father would have hated this weather. He used to say gray skies were lazy. He always preferred sunshine, I murmured. "I know," said Jenny, my lifelong friend, standing beside me. She squeezed my arm gently. "He'd complain about this for sure." Then I heard it, the low purr of an expensive engine. A sleek black car pulled up late, of course, and a few heads turned. Aaron stepped out, perfectly tailored suit, polished shoes, sunglasses still on despite the clouds. He walked slowly, deliberately, like he was making an entrance instead of arriving at a funeral. "Unbelievable," Jenny muttered. Aaron removed his sunglasses as he approached the grave, his expression carefully arranged. He nodded once at the minister, then glanced at me. "Emily," he said, as if we were bumping into each other at a restaurant. "You came," I replied flatly. "Of course," he said. "I wouldn't miss this." He stepped forward and placed a single red rose on the coffin, holding it there for a moment longer than necessary. A woman behind me sniffled. Aaron straightened, hands folded, eyes downcast. If anyone didn't know him, they might have thought he was grieving deeply. Jenny leaned closer to my ear. "If acting were a crime, he'd be in prison." I said nothing. I didn't trust myself to. After the service, Aaron approached again. "We should talk later," he said quietly. "About everything." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied. He raised an eyebrow. "We'll see." The lawyer's office that afternoon felt too warm, the air thick with old books and lemon cleaner. We sat across from Mr. Harlan, our father's longtime attorney, his hands folded neatly over a manila folder. "I'll begin," he said gently, glancing between us. Aaron leaned back in his chair, confident, one ankle resting over his knee. I sat upright, my hands folded in my lap, my heart strangely calm. "Per your father's wishes," Mr. Harlan began, "the family business, Carter Logistics, is to be inherited in full by Aaron Carter." Aaron smiled slightly, unsurprised. "And to Emily Carter," the lawyer continued, "your father leaves the Carter family farm in Rowan County, including all structures and land associated with the property." The room went quiet. "The farm?" I asked. Aaron laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "You're kidding." Mr. Harlan slid a small envelope across the desk toward me. "The deed and keys are enclosed." Aaron reached over, plucked the key from the envelope before I could, and held it up between his fingers. "This," he chuckled. "This old shack," he spun the key, metal catching the light. "Wow, guess Dad really knew how to divide things." I felt my jaw tighten. "Give that back." He dropped it onto the desk. "Relax, I don't want it." Mr. Harlan cleared his throat. "Your father was very clear in his instructions." "I'm sure he was," Aaron said smoothly, standing. He adjusted his cufflinks and looked down at me. "Well, congratulations on your inheritance." As he walked toward the door, he paused. "Try not to let it fall down on you." The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. I stared at the key on the desk, my reflection warped in the metal. My chest burned, not with tears, but something harder. Mr. Harlan watched me carefully. Your father believed you'd understand. I picked up the key, curling my fingers around it. I will, I said quietly. And as I stood to leave, humiliation still fresh in the air, I realized something had shifted, because whatever my father left me, it wasn't nothing, and I wasn't done being underestimated. 2 weeks later, I sat in the passenger seat of Jenny's car, my phone buzzing again and again in my lap, each vibration another reminder of exactly who my brother was. Jenny glanced over. Let me guess, Aaron. I unlocked the screen and held it up. A photo filled the display, Aaron leaning against not one but two gleaming sports cars, captioned "Hard work pays off, corporate success." Jenny let out a sharp laugh. 2 cars at the same time. At a funeral he couldn't show up on time, but for this, full production. He didn't even wait a month, I said quietly. Do you want me to throw your phone out the window? She offered. I shook my head. No, let him post. The car tires crunched over gravel as the road narrowed, trees closing in on both sides. The farm appeared suddenly, like it had been hiding, weather-beaten house, leaning fence, fields swallowed by weeds. Jenny slowed. This is it, I said. My grand prize. She parked and cut the engine. Okay, she said carefully. First impression, horror movie. I stepped out, the air thick with damp earth and neglect. The farmhouse sagged in the middle like it was tired of standing. Let's just see what this gift really is, I muttered. The front door groaned as I pushed it open. Dust danced in the light, and the smell old wood, mildew, something metallic hit us both. Jenny wrinkled her nose. Are you sure this place is safe? No, I said honestly. But neither is my life right now. We moved slowly, floorboards creaking under each step. Dad used to bring me here when I was little, I said. Before Mom died. He said this place taught patience. Jenny snorted. It's teaching tetanus. I smiled despite myself and took another step, crack. The sound was sharp and final. Emily, the floor gave way beneath me, and suddenly I was falling, air ripped from my lungs as I crashed into darkness. Pain exploded up my leg and shoulder as I hit hard ground. Emily, Jenny screamed. Oh my God, don't move. I gasped. I think I broke something. Jenny's face appeared above me through the hole. I'm calling for help, stay with me. I'm not going anywhere, I said weakly. She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking. Just talk to me. I blinked, my eyes adjusting. The cellar was low and narrow, dirt floor, stone walls, and then I saw it. Jenny, I whispered. What? There's something down here. She paused mid-call. Emily, now is not the time for treasure hunting. No, I said, squinting through the dust. I'm serious. Half buried near the wall was a metal box, rusted but solid, edges catching the dim light. Jenny leaned closer. Is that a safe? I don't know, I said, heart pounding harder than the pain allowed. But Dad used to say this place held stories. She swallowed. Of course it does. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance as Jenny finished the call. Help's coming, she said softly. Whatever that is, it's not going anywhere. I stared at the box, a strange calm settling over me despite everything. For the first time since the wool was red, since Aaron sneered and spun that key, I felt something shift, not hope exactly, but curiosity. And curiosity, I was learning, could be dangerous in the best possible way. I woke up to white light and the steady beep of a monitor, my body heavy and aching in places I didn't fully understand yet. My leg was wrapped and elevated, my arm stiff in a sling, and for a moment I forgot where I was, until the memory of falling snapped back into place. Hey, Jenny said softly from the chair beside the bed. Easy. I turned my head toward her. How bad is it? Fractured leg, she said, and a shoulder sprain. You scared the life out of me. Sorry, I murmured. She reached under the chair and lifted something carefully onto my lap. The metal box, cleaned now but still scratched and heavy. They let me bring it, she said. I told them it was sentimental. I rested my good hand on the lid. The room smelled like antiseptic and plastic, nothing like the damp earth of the cellar, yet my heart began to pound the same way it had down there. Open it, Jenny said gently. I hesitated. What if it's nothing? She raised an eyebrow. Your brother already got everything. You're allowed one mystery. I swallowed and flipped the latch. The lid creaked open, and inside, carefully arranged, was a folded, yellowed envelope. My name was written on it in my father's handwriting. For Emily. My breath caught. That's his writing. Jenny went still. Read it. I unfolded the paper slowly. For Emily, my true legacy lies where truth is hidden. You'll know what to do. My vision blurred. He knew, I whispered. He knew exactly how this would look. Beneath the note was a small velvet pouch. Inside, a single key. Then a folded map, creased and marked, with a downtown bank circled in blue ink. Tucked beneath that was a narrow strip of paper filled with handwritten words and numbers. "What's that?" Jenny asked. "I don't know," I said, staring at the codes. "But he didn't leave this by accident." Jenny leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Your dad was many things, Em. Subtle was one of them." I closed my eyes briefly, pressing the note to my chest. "He planned this." Tears slipped down my temples, not from pain this time, but from something warmer and sharper: recognition, validation. "He let Aaron think he won," I said quietly, "and trusted me to look deeper." Jenny smiled, eyes shining. "Sounds like him." I looked down at the key again, its weight suddenly enormous. "Whatever this opens, it's not a shack." "No," she said, "it's an answer." A nurse knocked lightly and peeked in. "How are we doing in here?" "Better," I replied, surprising myself with how true it felt. After she left, I stared at the ceiling, my mind already racing ahead, connecting dots I didn't yet fully see. For the first time since the funeral, since the reading of the will, the bitterness loosened its grip. My father hadn't abandoned me. He'd entrusted me. And lying there, broken but awake, I understood something clearly. This wasn't about money. It was about being seen. 3 days later, I sat in a polished downtown bank office that smelled faintly of leather and citrus cleaner. My fractured leg stretched out awkwardly in front of me, my arm still bound in its sling. Everything about the room was calm, controlled: muted beige walls, framed certificates, a quiet ticking clock that felt deliberately respectful. Across the desk sat a tall man in a charcoal suit, silver hair neatly combed back. His nameplate read Thomas Reynolds, vault manager. He studied the papers I'd slid toward him: the yellowed note, the key, the list of handwritten codes. "You said this was your father's handwriting?" he asked, glancing up. "Yes," I replied. "I grew up watching him write grocery lists. I'd recognize it anywhere." He nodded once. "That helps." Jenny sat beside me, hands folded in her lap, silent but alert. Mr. Reynolds typed something into his computer, then paused. "Your father contacted this branch several years ago," he said carefully. "He left very specific instructions." My pulse quickened. "What kind of instructions?" "That access to the box and its contents would be granted only to you, not jointly, not through an estate executor, only you." I exhaled slowly. "My brother is not authorized," he said calmly. He stood. "If you'll come with me." The vault hallway was narrow and quiet, lined with heavy doors and soft lights that felt more ceremonial than secure. Each step echoed, my crutch tapping against the floor, the sound oddly grounding. Mr. Reynolds stopped in front of a numbered drawer, unlocked it, and slid out a metal box. He set it on the table inside a small private room. "Take your time," he said, then stepped out, closing the door behind him. For a moment, neither Jenny nor I moved. "Okay," she whispered. Deep breath. I opened the box. Inside was a leather folder, dark and worn, with a label pressed neatly into the front. "Addendum to will." My throat tightened. He really thought of everything. Beneath the folder lay official documents, bank certificates, statements, neatly arranged. I lifted one and stared. $4,500,000. I blinked once. Then again. Jenny leaned closer. "Emily," I shook my head slowly. "This isn't real." "It is," she said, voice barely steady. I opened the folder. Inside was a signed legal addendum, my father's signature clear and unmistakable. The language was precise, intentional. "These assets are designated solely for Emily Carter. They are separate from the family business and not subject to division or contest." My hands trembled, not from greed, from relief so sharp it hurt. The door opened gently, and Mr. Reynolds stepped back in. "Everything appears to be in order," he said. "Your father left instructions that these funds were to remain undisclosed until you presented the codes personally." "Why?" I asked quietly. He met my eyes. "He said you'd understand." I laughed once, a soft, broken sound. He was right. Jenny wiped at her eyes. "That man was a strategist." Mr. Reynolds inclined his head. "He also requested we tell you this." He cleared his throat. He said, "If Emily ever doubts herself, remind her that silence can be a form of strength, but only when paired with action." Something in my chest cracked open. "Thank you," I said, meaning more than just the moment. As we left the vault, the weight I carried wasn't money, it was certainty. My father hadn't punished Aaron. He had trusted me, and for the first time since everything began, I didn't feel behind or wrong or small. I felt prepared. I returned to my small house late in the evening, moving carefully on my crutch, letting the familiar creaks of the floorboards greet me like old friends. Nothing here hinted at vaults or numbers or leather folders. The walls were still the same soft beige, the couch still had that burn mark from a candle I'd knocked over years ago. Ordinary, safe, exactly how I needed it. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text. I didn't even tell Jenny how much sleep I planned to lose. I put the bank documents into a plain folder, slid it into a box labeled tax stuff, and pushed it to the back of the closet. If Aaron knew anything about me, it was that I never showed my hand early. The next morning, sunlight spilled across my kitchen table as I opened my laptop and typed my brother's name into the search bar. His face appeared instantly. Confident smile, crisp suit, a man who believed the world rewarded boldness simply for being loud. Jenny arrived an hour later with coffee and her tablet. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I slept," I said. "I just didn't rest." She sat across from me. "So, are we stalking or are we researching?" "Observing," I corrected. I clicked through Aaron's recent posts. New office photos, new hires, a video of him shaking hands at some tech conference. Jenny squinted. "Why is he standing in front of a private jet?" "Because he wants people to see it," I said. "Not because the company needs it." We kept scrolling. Comments appeared beneath one post, polite at first, then cautious. "Aggressive expansion for a legacy logistics firm. Hope leadership understands the infrastructure risks. Surprised they dropped Mid-South Freight so quickly." Jenny leaned closer. "Dad worked with Mid-South for 20 years. Which means Aaron thinks loyalty is weakness," I replied. I opened a business forum I hadn't visited in years. Carter Logistics threads were active. Too active. "Listen to this," Jenny said, reading aloud. "Executive turnover has doubled since the acquisition. Senior managers leaving quietly." I closed my eyes briefly. "They're jumping ship." "Before it sinks," she added. We met again 2 days later at a quiet coffee shop tucked into a corner where no one listened too closely. I spread printed notes across the table, not labeled, not dramatic, just patterns. "Vendor cancellations," I said. "Over-leveraged credit," Jenny added. "Public optimism, private panic," I finished. She looked at me carefully. "You're not enjoying this." "No," I said, "I'm understanding it." I watched the steam rise from my coffee. Aaron always thought the company belonged to him. Dad thought it belonged to the people who kept it alive. Jenny tilted her head. "So what do you do when someone proves they can't protect what they were given?" I didn't answer right away. That night back home, I pulled out a notebook and began mapping, not moves, not revenge, but relationships. Investors, board structure. Silent partners my father had once mentioned in passing. I remembered him at the kitchen table years ago tapping a pencil against the paper. "Businesses don't collapse from one mistake," he'd said. "They collapse from arrogance." I closed the notebook slowly. Aaron was making mistakes, loud ones, public ones. And for the first time, I wasn't reacting to him. I was waiting. Waiting, I realized, was not weakness at all. It was positioning. 2 months later, the headlines changed. I was at my kitchen table when Jenny burst through the door without knocking, her phone already in her hand. "Emily," she said, breathless, "it's happening." I didn't look up right away. "Which part?" "3 contracts canceled," she said. "Public filings, and there's talk of a liquidity crunch." I closed my laptop slowly. "So the noise finally reached the surface." Jenny nodded. "Investors are nervous, really nervous." As if summoned by the words, my phone buzzed. "Unknown number, video call request." We stared at the screen together. "Don't," Jenny warned gently. "You don't owe him, I know," I said, tapping accept anyway. "But I want to hear it." Aaron's face filled the screen, and for a second I barely recognized him. His suit was wrinkled, tie loosened, hair damp at the temples. The confident polish was gone, replaced by something frantic. "Emily," he said too quickly. "Thank God." I said nothing. He cleared his throat. "Look, I wouldn't call if this wasn't serious." "You've never called unless you needed something," I replied evenly. He winced. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" He rubbed his forehead. "We're navigating a rough quarter." 3 canceled contracts isn't a rough quarter," I said. "It's a pattern." He glanced off screen then back. "You've been following the company." "I read," I said simply. Silence stretched. "I need help," he said finally. A loan, a bridge, anything, you're the only one who could move fast enough. Jenny shifted beside me tense. Aaron leaned closer to the camera. I wouldn't ask if I had another option. I tilted my head. That's funny, you had options before. Emily, please, he said, voice cracking. This isn't about pride anymore. No, I agreed. It never was, he exhaled sharply. Dad wouldn't want the company to fail. The words landed like a test. I met his eyes through the screen. Dad wanted the company respected. That's what I'm trying to do. By bleeding it dry, I asked. He slammed his hand on his desk. You think I wanted this? I paused. I think you wanted control. His mouth opened, then closed. Listen, he said, lowering his voice. Just tell me what you want. Equity, influence, a seat, we can. You didn't need me at the funeral, I said quietly. Remember, his face went still. You laughed, I continued. You said you were too busy, so don't tell me this is about family. It is now, he said hoarsely. I shook my head. No, now it's about consequences. He stared at me, disbelief flickering into anger. So you're just going to watch it burn? I'm going to let the truth finish speaking, I replied. Jenny's hand tightened around her cup. Aaron swallowed. If this goes under, you'll survive, I said. You always do. He leaned back, eyes dark. I won't forget this. I'm sure, I replied. I reached forward and ended the call. The screen went black, leaving my reflection staring back at me steady, unflinching. Jenny let out a breath she'd been holding. That took restraint. No, I said, standing carefully. That took clarity. Outside, a car passed, ordinary life moving on as if nothing monumental had just shifted. I felt no triumph, no guilt, just a quiet certainty. For the first time, Aaron had needed me, and I had chosen silence. The collapse didn't come all at once. Quietly, politely, dressed in press releases and careful wording, I followed it the way you follow a bruise changing color, knowing exactly what it meant, even when others pretended not to see it. Another round of layoffs, Jenny said one morning, sitting across from me at my dining table, her voice lower than usual. Warehouse supervisors this time. I closed my eyes. Those were Dad's people. He's cutting experience, she added. To buy time, I nodded slowly. Time he doesn't know how to use. Articles began stacking up. Not dramatic headlines, measured ones. Strategic restructuring, temporary downsizing, short-term liquidity measures. Aaron appeared in interviews again, smiling too tightly. This is just a recalibration, he said in one clip. Strong leadership requires bold decisions. Jenny muted the video. He looks exhausted. He should, I replied. He's finally doing something he's never done before. What's that? Losing control. A week later, I sat in a glass-walled office overlooking downtown, my crutch propped beside the chair, my posture calm. Across from me sat Margaret Klein, the same attorney who'd once worked with my father on contracts that lasted decades. You're certain? She asked, steepling her fingers. Yes, I said. I want the bid anonymous. No personal ties, no emotional fingerprints, she nodded. A shell acquisition through a third-party holding firm, clean, lawful, discreet. And the board? I asked. They're desperate, she replied frankly. They want stability, not loyalty. Jenny shifted beside me. How long before it's approved? Margaret smiled faintly. They've already signaled interest. The paperwork that followed was relentless but oddly soothing. Numbers, clauses, timelines. I signed everything without rush, without hesitation. This is surreal, Jenny said one night as I initialed another document. Months ago, you were sitting in hospice. And now, I replied, I'm finishing something he started. She studied me. Do you feel bad? I paused. I feel responsible. The bid went in under a name Aaron had never heard before. Conservative valuation, no arrogance, no threats, just inevitability. Days passed. Then came the call. Margaret's voice was calm, professional. The board has approved the acquisition, majority stake, effective immediately. I closed my eyes, not in relief but in acknowledgement. Does he know? I asked. No, she said. He believes the buyer is a private equity firm out of Chicago. Jenny covered her mouth with her hand. Oh, Emily. I ended the call and sat quietly, listening to the hum of my refrigerator, the ordinary sounds of a life that looked unchanged from the outside. That night I stood alone in my kitchen, holding a glass of water I'd forgotten to drink. The house was still, safe, unaware of what was coming. I thought of Aaron, pacing his office, convincing himself he still had time. Still had leverage. Still had authority. He didn't realize the decision had already been made. Not by me alone, but by every choice he'd made without understanding what he'd been given. I set the glass down gently. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was charged. Monday morning arrived crisp and bright, the kind of morning that pretends nothing irreversible is about to happen. I stood in the lobby of Carter Logistics headquarters, adjusting the cuff of my tailored navy suit, my crutch left behind for the first time since the accident. The glass walls reflected a version of me I barely recognized, upright, composed, finished. "You ready?" Margaret Klein asked quietly beside me. "I've been ready for years," I replied. The elevator ride up felt endless. Silent, deliberate. When the doors opened, voices spilled out, board members mid-argument, papers shuffling, tension thick enough to taste. No one noticed me at first as I stepped into the boardroom. Aaron was at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, hair perfectly styled again like armor reattached. He was talking fast. "We just need time," he insisted. "The new investor understands that. This meeting is procedural, procedural." I took one step forward, then another. Margaret cleared her throat. Every head turned. Aaron froze. "Emily," he said, blinking, "what are you doing here?" I walked to the empty chair opposite him and placed my briefcase on the table. The sound echoed louder than it should have. "Good morning," I said evenly. "Sorry I'm late," a board member frowned. "Ms. Carter, this is a closed meeting." Margaret stepped forward. "Not anymore." She slid a folder across the table. "The acquisition finalized Friday afternoon," she said calmly. "Majority stake, voting control." Aaron laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "Okay, cute, who put you up to this?" I opened the briefcase and removed a single document, placing it directly in front of him. His smile faltered. He read, once, then again, color drained from his face. "This has to be a joke," he whispered. I met his eyes. "The joke was thinking you'd get away with everything." The room went dead silent. A board member shifted uncomfortably. "You're saying you're the buyer." "I'm saying," I replied, "you're looking at the majority owner." Aaron pushed back his chair abruptly. No, this isn't happening." "It already did," Margaret said. "Legally, irrevocably." Aaron stood, hands flat on the table. "You did this behind my back." I tilted my head. "Just like the will, just like the business decisions, just like the funeral." "That's different," he snapped. "How?" I asked calmly. "You weren't supposed to," he stopped himself. I smiled faintly. "Understand. Pay attention, finish what Dad started." A murmur rippled through the room. One board member cleared his throat. "Ms. Carter, what are your intentions?" I looked around the table, then back at Aaron. "Stability, transparency, repair." Aaron laughed again, hollow this time. "You think you can run this company?" "I already am," I said. He turned to the board. "You can't let this happen." A woman near the window folded her hands. "We already did." Aaron's mouth opened, closed. I leaned forward slightly. "Meet your new boss." He stared at me, humiliation spreading across his face like a slow burn. "This isn't over," he said through clenched teeth. I nodded once. "No, it's just no longer yours." The silence that followed was heavy, exacting, earned. And for the first time in that room, power had a quiet voice. The emergency shareholder meeting was scheduled for noon, and by 11:45 the boardroom was already full. Executives whispered in tight circles. Assistants hovered near the walls. The air carried that particular strain of fear that only appears when people realize the rules have changed and no one warned them. Aaron sat 2 seats down from me, rigid, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitch. He hadn't spoken since the earlier meeting. He hadn't looked at me either. Margaret leaned in. "Once you start," she said quietly, "there's no undoing it." I nodded. "I know." When the last shareholder joined by video, I stood. "Thank you all for attending on such short notice," I said, my voice even, carrying easily through the room. "This meeting is about transparency." Aaron scoffed under his breath. "Of course it is." I ignored him and nodded to the screen behind me. The lights dimmed slightly as the first slide appeared. Vendor termination timelines, penalty fees, broken long-term contracts. A low murmur rippled through the room. "These decisions," I continued, "were made without board approval, without contingency planning, and in direct contradiction to the company's established risk protocols." Aaron finally looked at me. "You're twisting this." I turned toward him calmly. "Then you won't mind explaining it." I gestured to the next slide. Credit extensions, personal expense overlap, the sports cars categorized not as bonuses, but as corporate leased assets. A sharp intake of breath came from the far end of the table. You used company credit, one shareholder said slowly, for personal acquisitions. Aaron shot to his feet. That's not what this is, those were strategic branding expenses. 2 vehicles, I said, meeting his eyes during a liquidity crisis. The room went quiet again, this time colder. I clicked once more. Executive turnover, exit interviews, internal warnings flagged and dismissed. These reports were buried, I said, ignored or overridden. Aaron slammed his hand on the table. You don't understand what it takes to lead. I stepped closer. I understand exactly what it takes. My voice lowered, sharpened. You didn't just mismanage numbers, you erased trust. You didn't just risk the company, you disrespected our father's name. His face flushed. Don't bring him into this. He built this company on restraint, I said. On people, on promises kept. I turned back to the room. As majority owner, I'm invoking my authority to remove Aaron Carter from all executive and decision-making roles, effective immediately. Gasps. Chairs shifting. One shareholder nodded slowly. Another avoided looking at Aaron at all. This is a coup, Aaron said hoarsely. No, Margaret replied, it's governance. 2 security officers stepped forward, respectful but firm. Aaron looked around, searching for anyone to intervene. No one did. As he was escorted toward the door, he stopped and turned back to me. The anger had drained from his face, replaced by something smaller, older. I was wrong, he said quietly. I've learned my lesson. The room waited. I didn't answer. I held his gaze for a brief moment, long enough for him to understand that this silence wasn't cruelty, it was closure. The doors closed behind him with a soft, final sound. I turned back to the shareholders. We have work to do. And for the first time in years, the company and my name stood on solid ground again. The year that followed didn't arrive with fireworks or applause. It came quietly, the way real change usually does, through meetings that ran long, decisions that took patience, and mornings where I unlocked the office before anyone else arrived. The first thing I did was listen. I sat with managers my brother had never learned the names of. I asked warehouse supervisors what slowed them down. I called vendors Aaron had cut loose and asked what it would take to rebuild trust. At first, they didn't believe me. You're really staying? One of them asked during a site visit, arms crossed. Yes, I said simply. I'm not here to flip this, I'm here to fix it. Slowly, cautiously, the company steadied. Contracts were renegotiated, not with bravado but with humility. Internal reports were no longer buried. Mistakes were documented, addressed, learned from. Transparency stopped being a slogan and started becoming a habit. Jenny visited one afternoon, sitting across from me in my office, watching as I signed off on a new employee retention program. You know, she said, smiling softly, a year ago you were sitting in a hospital bed with a metal box on your lap. And now I'm buried in spreadsheets, I replied dryly. She laughed. Your dad would be proud. I paused, then nodded. I think so too. The press eventually caught on. Not to the drama that had already burned itself out, but to the quiet turnaround. Headlines shifted. Carter Logistics shows unexpected stability. Legacy firm finds new direction under new leadership. The family name started meaning something again. Not flash, not noise, work. I heard about Aaron through fragments, mutual acquaintances, industry gossip. He'd sold the sports cars, all of them quietly, no posts, no announcements. 6 months later, Jenny sent me a message while I was in a meeting. He's working entry-level at a mid-size firm in Raleigh. Operations assistant. I stared at the text longer than I expected to. Later that night, over dinner at my house, Jenny asked carefully, "How do you feel about that?" I thought for a moment. Relieved. Not angry. No, I said. Anger would mean I still needed something from him. She smiled. That's growth. The only time I saw Aaron in person that year was by chance. A coffee shop near the office. He looked thinner, quieter, no suit, just a button-down with rolled sleeves, coffee in a paper cup. He noticed me at the same time. For a second, neither of us spoke. Emily, he said finally. Aaron, he nodded once. I heard the company's doing well. It is, I replied, another pause. You were right, he said quietly. About a lot of things. I didn't argue. As he turned to leave, I said, sometimes the hardest fall is the one you need most. He stopped, then nodded without looking back. That winter, I stood at the office window after everyone had gone home, watching snow settle on the street below. The company lights were still on. People were still working, not out of fear, but because they believed in what they were building again. The name Carter no longer belonged to entitlement. It belonged to effort. And for the first time, that felt like a legacy worth carrying. On a golden autumn afternoon, I parked beneath a row of maples at the quiet cemetery and stepped out with a bundle of sunflowers cradled in my arm, the air cool and clean, the day moving slowly on purpose. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I walked the familiar path. Leaves skittered across the ground like whispers. I stopped in front of the headstone and exhaled. "Hi, Dad," I said softly. The stone was cool when I brushed my fingers over his name. I knelt, setting the sunflowers carefully at the base, their bright faces turned toward the light. "I kept my promise," I told him. "You didn't raise a fool." The breeze lifted, gentle, playful. It tugged at my coat, stirred the leaves. "I wish you could have seen it," I went on, my voice steady. The look on his face, the silence in the room, not because I won, but because the truth finally did. I smiled to myself. You always said winning was loud. Doing the right thing was quiet. A car door closed somewhere behind me. Footsteps paused, then retreated. The world gave me space. "I didn't burn it down," I said, as if that mattered most. "I fixed it, the people stayed, they trusted me." I leaned back on my heels. "And he's learning slowly on his own." The leaves swirled again, catching sunlight as they fell. I laughed quietly. I know, that's all you ever wanted." I stood, brushing dirt from my knees. "Thank you," I said, "for seeing me when no one else did." The breeze settled, the afternoon breathed. As I turned to go, my phone buzzed Jenny's name. I answered without looking. "You there?" she asked. "I am," I said. "It's beautiful today." "I figured," she replied. "Coffee after?" I glanced once more at the stone. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Let's do that." I ended the call and walked back toward the car, the sun warm on my shoulders, the path clear. Behind me, the sunflowers nodded in the light, bright and unafraid. Injustice had tried to make me small. Resilience taught me how to stand. And in standing, quietly, fully, I found my freedom. If this story resonated with you, tell me where you're watching from and what moment stayed with you the most. Write it in the comments, and let's talk about it together. That was the end of the story. As I walk away from all of it, I still think about Aaron choosing to finally start over at the bottom instead of blaming everyone else. And it makes me wonder, did he do the right thing by accepting that fall, or was it too little, too late? Tell me what you think in the comments, because I really want to know your perspective. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories like mine.